This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Message from Army Commanders Conference. The participants are Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, Defence Analyst, and Ajay Banerjee, Journalist.
The Army Commanders Conference is a meeting of the senior-most Army commanders of the country, and it is being conducted in Delhi. And they have a multitude of agendas to speak about during this 5-day conference. And this conference is held once in 6 months. With me, General Sanjay Kulkarni. First of all, take us through the most important point which we know is part of the agenda in the conference. That is with regards to the operations in both the borders in the west and the north. How do you see it? How it will be discussed? Please take our listeners through this.
As you're aware, that these are biennial conferences, attended, of course, chaired by the chief, and all the army commander, the vice chief, the deputy chiefs, all the PSOs, everyone attend this conference. It's an institutionalized platform wherein operational capabilities and all of it are discussed, and very important of it is also addressed by the Raksha Mantri. Now, having said that, obviously, since it's being held at a time when you have the Russo-Ukraine war going on, and we have a tremendous amount of dependency on the Russian equipment. So obviously that is now going to be coming up for discussion in case if there's any kind of a spare, backup, even the equipment which have been ordered, how the deliveries will take place. So far, there has not been a shortfall. And then what is very important is Eastern Ladakh, things haven't eased much as we would have expected. So preparations over there, you see the kind of developments that are taking place in Pakistan, it really concerns, but yes, preparation to ensure that nothing untoward happens. The ceasefire is holding, which is a very good thing. So all these things which are going to be coming up, infrastructure development, which is to take place, and what is the progress on it, all this will come up.
General Kulkarni, 2 quick points about the Army Commanders Conference, that the commanders will be discussing the induction of niche technology and also the modernization being done through the localization or indigenization as we call it. Sir, please, both the points, how important is for the Army modernization with indigenization, and the second point, that how do we go about in the future, niche technologies.
The tremendous amount of focus is on Atmanirbhar. And that leads us to indigenization. And obviously with the kind of situation that is developing in the world, we have to ensure that at least in matters of security, whatever be it, we must be self-sufficient. And in that context, even the way the Indian ordnance factories, the way they've gone about in corporatization, the way the indigenization is picking up, the way the private industries are coming forward, all these things are very, very important because modernization cannot take a backseat. And modernization will ensure that there is proper preparation, and preparation will prevent any untoward eventualities that may come up. And in that context, the way the government is going about imposing restrictions on importing equipment, they have already laid about 110 items that they will not be imported. They will be made in India. And that is very, very important. And it's important even for the industry within the country to cope up with the requirements, because the GSQRs are there. All of it must go as per the GSQR. And the GSQRs are now, as I can see, a lot of improvement that has taken place in the private industry. A lot of improvement hopefully should take up place in the ordnance factories which are being corporatized. And all of this will lead to indigenization, lead to self-sufficiency, and ultimately attain what we are looking at, the Atmanirbhar Bharat.
I must remind the listeners, when General Kulkarni says GSQR, that stands for General Staff Qualitative Requirements. Those are like the benchmark or the parameters for a fresh tender. General Kulkarni, the next question remains about niche technologies. The normal common man thinks that the army soldier is a man with a rifle moving around the front. So the technology has changed. There are UAVs, there are tactical UAVs, there are sensors, there are ground-based sensors, there are night vision devices, and also multitude of helicopters and also attack helicopters with the Indian Army. So what is the further niche technology we are looking at?
All of these technologies are high-end technologies. And all of them, we have to ensure that first, not just the research, the designing, development, and manufacturing of it has to be in India. The wars have gone miles ahead. It is no longer a man just standing with a weapon like what you said. He needs to know what's going on. He ought to have been able to see the battlefield, be able to visualize what is happening, what is it that the enemy plans to do. The UAVs are there. Recce and surveillance equipment is there to be able to get to the enemy, detect and destroy, and then to ensure 100% destruction. All these things really matter. And not just that, we have to ensure that the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy, all of them also have to be in sync with each other. It's a very high-tech battle, and we should be prepared for it. Preparation is very important. Forewarned is forearmed. Until and unless we know what we are heading for. Half the battle is won when you know what the enemy can do to you. And then you be ready to see that he cannot cause damage to you. And to ensure no damages are caused, very, very important is all what you said. Satellite, whether it is cyber, whether it is space, whether it is to have information, whether it is to see at night. So all of this requires a very high-tech equipment, and high-tech equipment, just not that, the understanding of the high-tech equipment, to be able to get along with that equipment, and it takes a lot of time to be working on it, on the simulators to work on it, so that least amount of, I would say, the equipment is not damaged nor misused in war. Everything is extremely expensive, extremely expensive. And therefore, very important that the soldiers are trained on it, number one. Number two, they know how to go about it. And number three, that everything, all of this equipment works on batteries which have to be able to work at sub-zero temperatures and the kind of environment that we all work in. And therefore, it's a huge responsibility.
General Kulkarni has brought out very well about the use of technology. General Saab, we will move on to the next point of the Commanders Conference. It talks about capability voids and further focus on capability development. Sir, what are these capability voids? The listeners probably know that the AK-203 rifle, which is coming up in a joint venture with the Russians, one of the things the Army wanted, the wheeled armored protection vehicle, which the DRDO and the Tata have just made, that is being inducted as part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat, Prime Minister Modi has initiated. We have already gotten the new artillery guns called the ATAGs, designed by the DRDO, being made by the private sector. What further are the capability voids, sir?
See, what you rightly said, these capability voids, first and foremost, modernization is a continuous process. Not that if the AK-203 is not there, we don't have a rifle. We have a rifle. But yes, AK-203 was to be gone in for collaboration with the Russians, whether it is T-90s, where the requirement of British of aircrafts, where the engines are required, when again, Ukraine was also involved, or whether it's the frigates which have to be manufactured, in wherein they would be manufactured in the Russian ports, but the engines were to be coming from Ukraine. So there was a lot of it which was to happen, and it would take time. It isn't that, of course, the S-400 deliveries as scheduled are going on, but there are a whole lot of other equipments also. There will be a void, as you can understand, and there will be a slight delay in delivery. There will be slight delay in transfer of technologies. There will be delays in ensuring absorption of technology. So yes, the capability development is a must. There will be void for a short time, and that's what exactly this Commanders Conference is all about, to put their heads together to ensure that there are no voids and that the voids can be catered for within the country. First and foremost, that ensure that indigenization takes place, and therefore what we spoke about, to see to it that these voids are filled and that the capability development is not retarded, and that we are prepared for any eventuality.
General Saab, there is also a talk of the commanders discussing infrastructure development in the border areas. What is the kind of infrastructure you're looking at? More bridges, more connectivity of roads, more helipads in the forward areas? What are like the things which you get to hear, what is needed actually?
All of it, what you just said. Reason is, infrastructure is something which has actually caught up in just about a recent decade or so, where a lot of push has been given to see to it that the roads come out well, the helipads come out well, the airstrips are upgraded, the bridges are there in place. So all the places where it would sometimes maybe taking about weeks to reach or days to reach, you can now reach in 2 hours. And that is where the kind of infrastructure is very, very important. Because we see what our adversaries are doing. You see the kind of development the Chinese have done in Tibet, the kind of roads that they've built up, the kind of helipads they have made, the kind of airfields that they have made, the kind of railways they have constructed. All of it, they have gone in a very big way. So we have to ensure that our infrastructure catches up, and we are now on the right track, and we must work. As I said, it's a never-ending process. This will never end. But we must ensure whether it is in the northeast, whether it's in eastern Ladakh, whether it's in the central sector, all of it where the infrastructure is a very, very important thing. We must be able to reach within a short time. So all these will come up for discussion. We'll see how the border roads have undertaken works, where are they lacking, what equipment is further required to ensure that the infrastructure is given a fillip over there, how much the privatizations can be done. There's also a lot of places where you find private people come up and build roads for you in the remote area. So all of this will come up, and this is a very important aspect, just not the roads, just not the helipads, the living conditions over there, even if there are some tunneling which is required to be done, and like things are going on in Zozila, tunneling is going on in the northeast, the tunneling is going on in Sela. So all over, wherever the tunneling work is required, to see that it is not lagging behind. It is keeping up with the time and pace it is there. And all over India, infrastructure is improving, and definitely the infrastructure in the forward area must be of international standards.
General Kulkarni, there was reports in the media that the Army Commanders Conference will discuss about the induction of e-vehicles or electric vehicles in the Indian Army. Please explain to our listeners, e-vehicles may not be an option in the forward operational areas or even high altitude, but possibly the e-vehicles can be a mode of transport for admin logistics in the planes and the peace air stations. Is it possible?
See, wherever e-vehicles can be used, by all means it be done. But where it may be difficult to charge them for reasons of temperatures having fallen down or lack of infrastructure for charging which comes up over there. So there is definitely a need. There is no denying the fact. But wherever, as I said, if the infrastructure comes up so well that you could have e-vehicles being used, why not? By all means. I think it's a real requirement because firstly it ensures the environment cleanliness. It ensures much less dependency on oil. It ensures cleanliness of the entire environment over there. So all of this is being kept in mind, and when it is the order of the day, e-vehicles, wherever within the cantonment where it can be used or where the facilities for charging are there, because that's the most important thing, the facilities for charging or even replacement of batteries that are there. So that even for charging could be done in their areas, the battery is available to them, and within a short time, say, or kind of thing. But yes, the kind of roads are there, the kind of climatic conditions are there. Suddenly you find a roadblock has taken place, where for hours no movement has taken place, whereas the batteries have a lifetime, and under such circumstances that they are operating in such high altitude areas, its efficiency might also be dropping. But yes, notwithstanding all that, you can use e-vehicles where they can be used, and there are lots of places where the e-vehicles can be used. Where they can't be used, obviously they will be dependent on petrol and diesel.
General Kulkarni, there is a talk of digitization of the Indian Army. What does this digitization of the Indian Army mean? We already know that there is a separate kind of a system, internet, with the Army uses of its own. What digitization is being done?
See, the digitization is essential aspect because it obviously they have to see to it that not only within the organization, but even with the Air Force communication, with the Navy is concerned, communication internal is concerned, digitization, and in a manner that it is smooth, because until and unless there is digitization, because everything today is on data, everything passes on data, and until unless we have all of it in place, you will find it extremely difficult to cope up with. And to ensure that the digitization in war works, because no question of it being jammed, no question of it being something gets compromised, no question. So we have to ensure digitization without it getting compromised. We have to ensure that we keep pace with the development, we keep pace with the war. Until unless everyone is on the same grid, we may not be able to really use the resources to its optimum level. And therefore, this digitization helps us that everybody, right from the soldier who's fighting the war to the commanders who are taking decisions, that decision is implementable by the man on the ground only through digitization and through the data that is being passed. So I think it's a very, very essential thing. The Army lays a lot of emphasis on it, not just now, for years it's been doing at it. A lot of refining is required to be done, because so much of it, we can think of it while we are working, how to go about it. But actually, when we go on ground, you may find a certain amount of traffic flow is so large that it may get blocked somewhere or the other. So this digitization helps us in preparing ourselves, and the need is to be able to ensure that the man on the ground gets the latest information to be able to defend himself and be able to kill the enemy.
We had a long discussion, General Kulkarni. You were very nice in explaining to our listeners how the Indian Army's top leadership under what is called the Commanders Conference is discussing at the moment in New Delhi very important points with regards to country's security, the present situation of the borders, the spectrum of conflict, and the analysis of capability voids, which would need means that, in other words, more weapons or whatever is needed, they will be assessing that, and also infrastructure in border areas. Thank you for speaking to us, General Kulkarni.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Message from Army Commanders Conference. The participants were Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, Defence Analyst, and Ajay Banerjee, Journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.